Teresa from Life Beyond Diabetes, and today I am going to take on the controversial topic of artificial sweeteners. Artificial sweeteners are also known in the science world as non-nutritive sweeteners, so I probably will be using both of those terms interchangeably. So artificial sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners. In the science world, we tend to look at artificial sweeteners as the ones that are created in a lab. So things like saccharin, aspartame, and sucralose. So Sweet and Low, Equal, Splenda, and then other brand names. Those would be the ones that generally are considered artificial sweeteners. I'm going to lump all of them into one for most things today. The plant-based sweeteners, which are also non-nutritive sweeteners, are things like stevia, monk fruit, erythritol, and those are derived from plants, and there's a slight difference that I'll talk about a little bit later in the way that the body reacts to those versus the chemically created ones. And this is a really hot topic in the world of diabetes and obesity medicine, which are my two specialties. So I've done a lot of research. I've read a lot, been to many lectures where they talk about this. And in preparation for today's live, I actually rewatched two of the lectures. And as I was going back with my kind of preconceived notions of what I recommend to my clients and how I live my own personal life, is I was expecting to hear that non-nutritive sweeteners are just as much a problem as sugar is. And I was surprised that I watched two lectures, and when they were presented at the Obesity Medicine conference a few years ago, these lectures were presented back to back. And I don't remember that they were basically coming up with opposing viewpoints. But they were. They basically, one of them said, one thing that they both agreed on, sugar is bad. All sorts of diseases associated with high intake of sugar, in addition to diabetes, heart disease, cancer. I could just go on and on about the things that are related to high intake of sugar. But one of the lectures said, sugar's bad, water's good, artificial sweeteners, meh, just kind of neutral. I was not expecting that. I did not remember that. What I did remember was the other lecture that said, sugar's bad, artificial sweeteners, just as bad. May as well be eating sugar if you're going to be eating artificial sweeteners. I'm going to tell you, just cut to the end, my opinion falls somewhere in the middle. I don't think they're neutral. I don't think they are as bad as sugar, but we'll talk about that when we get a little bit further. So basically, the one lecture kind of dismissed most of the studies that were seen in the that we talked about in the second lecture, and so in that second lecture, what they talked about with the artificial sweeteners was that they looked at mostly animal models, but there were some human studies as well that they looked at, population data. And what they found is that people who consume artificial sweeteners saw no improvement in their weight and no improvement in their metabolic markers. And in fact, those things were usually worse. Now, I do know, and they didn't talk about this in the lecture, but I do know that that is kind of a chicken or egg thing. We don't know if people who have weight issues turn to the artificial sweeteners and therefore that biases the outcome of those studies, or if the artificial sweeteners are causing some of these weight problems and the metabolic problems. Hard to tell, but what we do know is that there was not any improvement when consuming those artificial sweeteners. And there's a few reasons that are typically cited for that. And the first one is the one that was really talked about a lot in that lecture that I'm referring to. And that is that when you consume something that's sweet, even when it is a non-nutritive sweetener, you're not getting calories from it, your brain says sweet, sugar, and that provokes an insulin response. And over time, as your body kicks out insulin when it doesn't need it, you build up insulin resistance, even more than you may already have. So artificial sweeteners, including the plant-based ones, can get in the way of regulating, getting the proper amount of insulin to go along with what you're eating. Um, so that's one of the big problems with them. Another problem, and this is where, earlier I mentioned that I was going to talk about the difference between the chemical artificial sweeteners and the plant-based ones. Hey, Isabel, I see that, and I'm actually going to talk about that right now about stevia. Um, so stevia is one of the plant-based sweeteners, and it. So what they found about and this was not in these lectures, I've actually learned this from a different lecture about sweeteners, is that the plant-based sweeteners don't seem to have any effect on the microbiome. So those are all the little creatures that live inside us that keep us healthy. That we want to keep we talk a lot about keeping a good balanced microbiome. The plant-based sweeteners, stevia, monk fruit, and erythritol, don't have an effect on the microbiome. However, they have found that the artificial sweeteners, the ones made in the lab, do have a negative effect on the microbiome. They change the microbiome. And research now is looking at the microbiome and seeing that can affect all sorts of aspects of health, including diabetes and obesity. So insulin response, harmful to the microbiome, but not the natural ones. Again, the natural ones do not harm the microbiome. So if you're going to choose a non-nutritive sweetener, I recommend choosing one stevia or monk fruit or erythritol. And then the third reason that there's a problem with them is that it's added sweetener. And we all like sweet things. We all like desserts. That's an evolutionary thing. We're programmed to want sweet because that's where the carbohydrates came from. That's what kept our ancestors alive. But when we get sweet all the time and we're getting that reinforced, hey, I want some dessert, and even if you're getting it from an artificial sweetener, you're getting that reinforcement that you need sweet all the time. And so it habituates you to the sweetness. And you might think, well, I'm going to like sweet no matter what. Well, when you've been off of sweets for a while, you find that things taste a lot sweeter than they used to. So I eat sweets from time to time. I have splurges. I've told you before that I'm completely human. I do that. I don't live a sanctimonious life at all. But I've noticed that, first of all, when I do eat something sweet, what used to be just kind of like, oh, yum, this is really good, sometimes it's just too much sweet. It's too much sugar. And I've also noticed that things that didn't used to seem sweet, like fresh berries, fresh berries, they're maybe sweet. When you have not been eating sweetened food or beverages, and then you have some berries, they're very sweet and they're fantastic. So again, avoiding the artificial sweeteners to avoid getting used to having that sweet all the time helps you really taste the food and the sweet that is naturally occurring in your food. So I just presented two kind of opposite perspectives. I think from what I've said, you can probably figure out where I fall. And the first thing I'm going to say is this is yet another one of those things, as with many things related to type 2 diabetes, there isn't one answer. It's very individual. It's very much how you are going to decide to live your life and the decisions you're going to make for your own health. We can all agree that sugar is bad and we need to reduce sugar intake no matter what, because there's solid research that shows that sugar causes all sorts of disease and problems. But beyond that, the experts come out on both sides. Some of the experts say, yeah, let's go with the artificial sweeteners because it'll get you eating healthier and things taste good. And there's some of them that say, well, no, that's not because of the effects that it has on the body. So like I said, I tend to fall somewhere in between. If you need something really sweet, definitely, I would say go with an artificial sweetener over sugar. And in that case, I also highly recommend that you avoid the chemical sweeteners and stick with things like stevia, monk fruit, and erythritol. Anything that you can find in the natural food store is probably something that is not going to be as harmful to your body and to your microbiome the ones that come in the little pink packets on the table. Um, so let me make sure I didn't miss anything. I will tell you that I keep in my house. I keep sugar, and I keep stevia, and I keep monk fruit, and I use all of them. I use all of them very minimally. I generally use them only in cooking. I do not sweeten my beverages. I do not add sweet to other things. But sometimes if I'm cooking something that needs